The drums of war echoed across the valley, shaking the ground like thunder. Smoke rose in the distance, turning the sky dark and heavy with the scent of fire. Villages had already burned, and whispers spread that an ancient power had awoken. None of the clans were ready for it, and none truly understood what it meant. Yet every warrior, human and alien alike, felt the call of battle. In the heart of the chaos, an orc warlord raised his weapon high. His roar split the air, calling his people to stand against enemies that came from beyond the mountains. His tusks gleamed in the dim light, his scars told the story of old battles, and his eyes carried a fire that dared anyone to challenge him. Behind him, thousands of warriors prepared, their blades sharpened and their hearts steady. The war was not only about land but about survival itself. Among the humans there was fear but also determination. They had seen the destruction before, and they would not let history repeat. Young soldiers gripped their swords tighter, watching the horizon where the enemy gathered like a storm. The elders warned that this conflict was different, that darker forces whispered behind the armies, twisting them into something more than flesh and bone. A war of this kind would test not only strength but spirit. The first clash was sudden. Arrows filled the sky, and shields rose to meet them. The ground shook as warriors charged, the sound of steel striking steel filling the air like a deadly song. Human knights collided with orc raiders, their cries of fury mixing with roars of pain. Dust rose in thick clouds, blinding fighters who swung blindly, desperate to survive. Blood painted the soil, marking the valley as the place where destiny would turn. But something else stirred beyond the battlefield. From the shadows of broken ruins, a new enemy revealed itself. Cloaked in dark armor, their movements were not natural. Eyes glowing like fire, they struck without mercy. Neither human nor orc had seen such warriors before, and their weapons burned with strange energy. It became clear that the war was not simply between clans, but against something ancient. Something that had waited for this moment to return. The orc warlord felt it first. His blade struck one of these shadow warriors, but instead of falling, the creature twisted unnaturally and fought harder. Rage turned to shock, then to grim understanding. This was not a simple war of tribes or kingdoms. It was something greater, something older than memory. He bellowed for his people to hold the line, even as the strange fire cut through their shields. He knew they were not prepared, but retreat was not an option. Among the chaos, one human soldier fought differently. He was not the strongest, nor the most skilled, but there was something in his eyes that burned with more than survival. His sword struck with precision, his stance unshaken even when the shadows swarmed around him. Other soldiers began to notice, gathering near him, following his movements as if instinct told them that he carried something beyond ordinary courage. He did not yet know it, but his presence was shaping the tide of battle. As the war raged on, the sky cracked with thunder that was not natural. A storm of unnatural light spread across the battlefield, searing the ground wherever it touched. Both humans and orcs turned their heads, fear striking their hearts. The shadow warriors moved as if the storm guided them, gaining strength with every flash. Screams filled the air as lines broke, warriors fell, and the ground itself split under the pressure. No one had seen power like this before, and it forced both armies to realize the truth. The war they thought they were fighting was only the beginning. Something much darker had been waiting in silence, and now it was awake. The orc warlord raised his weapon again, roaring at his people to fight not just for land or blood, but for their very existence. The human soldier who stood like stone among the chaos felt the same pull. He tightened his grip on his sword, staring into the storm with eyes that did not waver. He did not know why, but deep within his soul, he felt chosen. The unexpected war had begun, and neither side knew how long they could survive it. But in that valley of fire and blood, fate was already weaving its threads around those who would decide the future. Asterisk. The valley was no longer just a battlefield. It had become a graveyard of the old world. Bodies of both humans and orcs lay scattered across the ground, their blood mixing in the dirt. The cries of the wounded echoed between the broken hills. Above them, the storm of unnatural light still churned, its glow casting strange shadows across the dead. The air felt heavy, as if the sky itself was watching them. The human soldier stood among the wreckage, his chest heaving, his sword stained red. He had survived the first wave, but the shadows were far from gone. Around him, a small circle of survivors formed. Men and women who had once been afraid now looked to him, as if his courage gave them strength. None knew his name, yet all felt the same strange pull toward him. He was not a leader by crown or rank, but in the silence of fear, he became one. Across the battlefield, the orc warlord growled as he pulled his axe free from the chest of a shadow creature. His tusks dripped with blood, his skin streaked with black ash. He had fought many wars, crushed many enemies, yet never had he faced something like this. He raised his head and saw the human soldier across the smoke. Their eyes locked for a moment. No words were spoken, but both understood they were no longer enemies. A greater threat had chosen them both. The shadow warriors moved in waves, their glowing eyes unblinking. They did not scream, they did not bleed. They simply fought, each strike precise and merciless. Every blow from their burning blades left wounds that did not heal. Human healers wept as their magic failed, while orc shamans chanted louder, their spells breaking against the enemy like water against stone. Despair grew like a sickness, infecting every corner of the armies. Then the ground split again. From the earth rose figures larger than any warrior. Giants of molten stone and fire, their bodies dripping with lava, their roars shaking the mountains. The shadow warriors bowed as these beasts emerged, as if they were servants to an even darker master. Fear spread like wildfire. Orcs stumbled back, humans dropped their shields, and for a brief moment, even the bravest hearts broke. None had expected this nightmare. The human soldier refused to retreat. He planted his feet firmly and shouted for his people to hold their ground. His voice was not commanding like a king's, but it cut through the chaos like a blade. Men and women who were ready to flee turned back, gripping their swords once more. Even the orcs nearby paused, their eyes widening at the humans' defiance. The warlord snarled with approval, slamming his axe into the ground to steady his warriors. For the first time in history, the two sides fought shoulder to shoulder. The giants struck hard, their fists smashing the earth, sending shockwaves through both armies. Each step was like thunder, and every roar threatened to break the spirit of those who faced them. Yet the soldiers fought on, their blades flashing like sparks against stone. The human soldier leapt at one of the giants, his sword glowing faintly as if something unseen guided his hand. He struck deep into its fiery flesh, and though the beast did not fall, it roared in pain. A spark of hope returned. The orc warlord joined him, swinging his axe with such force that the ground cracked. Together, human and orc cut into the giant, their strikes landing again and again. The armies watched as their leaders fought side by side, and the sight reignited their courage. They charged once more, their voices rising in a roar that rivaled the storm. The valley shook not just with fear, but with defiance. For the first time, the shadows faced resistance that did not break. But in the distance, high on a broken cliff, a figure watched. Cloaked in darkness, with eyes burning brighter than all the others, it raised its hand and the storm shifted. The giants grew stronger, their flames burning hotter, their roars louder. The shadow warriors pressed harder, striking faster. The battle was far from won. If anything, it was only becoming worse. And yet, both armies felt something stir deep within their souls. They had seen courage, they had seen unity, and they had felt the first taste of what true resistance meant. The unexpected war was no longer just survival. It was the beginning of something greater, something that would decide the fate of all. And in the storm, the human soldier and the orc warlord stood as the unbroken pillars holding the line. The storm raged above the valley, painting the sky in colors of fire and ash. Warriors still clashed below, but all eyes were drawn to the figure standing on the cliff. Cloaked in shadows, its presence was heavier than the storm itself. Even from afar, the armies felt its gaze, cold and merciless, like a blade pressed against the throat of the world. The human soldier lifted his eyes, his grip tightening on his sword. He did not know who or what the figure was, but every part of him screamed that this was the true enemy. The giants of molten fire, the shadow warriors, even the endless storm, these were only pieces of the will that stood above them. His heart pounded, yet he did not look away. Somewhere inside, he felt as if fate had brought him to this moment. The orc warlord snarled, his tusks flashing as he raised his axe toward the figure. He had fought many leaders, kings and warlords, but this was something older, something that carried the weight of forgotten ages. His warriors growled beside him, uneasy, but the warlord's voice cut through the fear. "That is the master," he roared. "Break it, and we break them all." His voice thundered across the battlefield, filling his soldiers with rage instead of despair. The figure finally moved. Its hand lifted, and the storm above twisted like a serpent. Bolts of dark lightning struck the earth, tearing the ground open. From the cracks rose more creatures, twisted forms of beasts that once lived in the forests and mountains. Wolves with burning eyes, birds made of black smoke, and serpents with scales of steel. Each carried the same unnatural fire in their veins, bound by the figure's will. The battlefield shook as the nightmare army doubled in size. Fear spread quickly. Human knights staggered back, their shields trembling. Orc raiders, fierce as they were, hesitated at the sight of the twisted beasts. For a moment, the line nearly broke. But then, the human soldier's voice rose. "Hold!" he shouted, his words cutting through the chaos. "If we fall here, everything ends." His tone was sharp, his stance unshaken. Though no crown rested on his head, his presence was like a king standing before his people. Around him, men and women found their courage again. The orc warlord let out a roar of his own, echoing the human's call. "Fight with me," he bellowed. "For blood, for clan, for life." His warriors slammed their weapons against their shields, answering him with thunderous cries. The two voices, one human and one orc, merged into a single command that reached every corner of the valley. The shadows pressed harder, but the warriors now fought not with fear, but with fury. The battle became chaos. Blades clashed, arrows flew, and fire consumed everything in its path. The human soldier fought like one possessed, his sword striking with strange precision. Every move felt guided by something unseen. He cut through beasts of smoke and creatures of steel, each swing leaving trails of light in the air. The orc warlord fought beside him, his axe tearing through giants of fire, each strike shaking the ground. Together, they became a storm of their own, yet the dark figure did not falter. Its glowing eyes narrowed, and a voice like thunder rolled across the battlefield. "You cannot break what was bound before your kind took its first breath." The words echoed in every ear, not spoken, but forced into the minds of all. Many stumbled, clutching their heads, the weight of the voice breaking their resolve. Even the bravest warriors felt their knees weaken, for this was no mortal enemy. This was something eternal. The human soldier staggered under the weight of the voice, but he did not fall. His eyes burned with a fire that refused to break. He raised his sword high, its blade catching the strange light of the storm, glowing brighter than before. The orc warlord turned toward him, eyes narrowing as if recognizing something. He had seen many warriors, But never had he seen a weapon answer a man's soul like this. For the first time, he wondered if this soldier was more than flesh and blood. The figure on the cliff lowered its hand, and the storm fell silent for a moment. Then, with a motion as simple as a whisper, it shattered the silence with another command. The earth groaned, and a massive shadow began to rise from the far side of the valley. Larger than any giant, darker than any beast, its form was hidden in smoke. But its size alone promised doom. Both armies froze at the sight, their courage trembling. The war was no longer just a battle for survival. It was the beginning of the end. The battlefield fell silent as the massive shadow rose higher, its form wrapped in smoke and fire. Its head brushed the storm above, its body shaped like no beast known to humans or orcs. Horns curved from its skull like jagged towers, and its eyes burned with endless hunger. Each step shook the earth, sending cracks racing across the valley floor. Even the giants of molten stone bowed before it, their flames dim in its presence. The human soldier felt his chest tighten. He had seen war, but this was no enemy made of flesh. This was a nightmare given form, a monster born from the darkness itself. Around him, men trembled, their swords rattling in their hands. Some whispered prayers, others cried silently, but none moved forward. For a heartbeat, the will to fight seemed lost. The orc warlord growled low, refusing to bow. He planted his axe into the ground and raised his voice so all could hear. "It is only death," he roared, "and we were born to fight it." His warriors slammed their weapons against their shields, a wall of sound against the silence. Yet even their courage faltered when the colossus leaned forward and bellowed. Its roar shattered the clouds, making the air itself tremble. The shadow warriors charged first, pouring across the battlefield like a tide. Their blades burned brighter than before, their movements faster. Humans and orcs met them with steel, but the clash was harder than anything before. Every strike against the shadows felt heavier, every wound more deadly. Still, the human soldier pressed forward, his sword flashing through the storm. Something unseen guided his strikes, as if the blade itself was alive in his hand. Beside him, the orc warlord fought like a beast unleashed. His axe tore through enemy after enemy, blood and ash spraying in every direction. Yet his eyes never left the colossus towering in the distance. He knew their blades were cutting down shadows, but unless the giant fell, the war was already lost. He roared at his warriors to push forward, to carve a path through the tide. Each step was a battle, but slowly they moved. The colossus finally reached the valley floor. Its foot crashed down, crushing warriors beneath it like insects. Entire ranks were broken in a single step. With one sweep of its arm, it sent hundreds flying, their screams lost in the storm. Arrows rained upon it, spears were hurled, magic was cast, but nothing pierced its dark hide. It moved with slow, unstoppable force, like a mountain walking into battle. The human soldier's sword glowed brighter as he raised it high. The light cut through the storm, catching the attention of both armies. Warriors looked at him, their fears slowly turning to something else: hope. He did not shout like the warlord. He did not roar with rage. His voice was steady, calm, yet filled with power. "Stand with me," he said. "We will not let it take this world." His words struck deeper than steel, binding hearts together. The orc warlord nodded once, his tusks glinting as he grinned through blood and fire. "Then we fight as one," he said, his voice like thunder. For the first time in history, human and orc charged side by side, their roars rising together. The ground shook with their steps as they threw themselves into the wave of shadows. Blades flashing, shields locking, voices united. The valley became a furnace of war, the colossus raised its head, its burning eyes narrowing on the soldier and the warlord. With a hand larger than a fortress, it reached down, sweeping away hundreds in a single motion, but neither man broke. The soldier's glowing sword and the warlord's massive axe rose together, striking at the monster's hand. Sparks exploded. The beast roared, and for the first time, it pulled back. The impossible had happened. They had heard it. But the victory was small, and the price was great. The Colossus let out a howl so powerful the sky split open. Lightning of pure darkness rained down, tearing apart both armies. The valley was drowning in chaos again, and though they had struck it once, the real fight had only begun. The shadow had not come to win a battle. It had come to end an age. The Colossus roared again, a sound so deep that even the mountains trembled. Darkness rolled across the valley like a tide, swallowing fire and light. Warriors stumbled, their hearts breaking under the weight of despair. Arrows fell from the sky like ash, and the air itself grew heavy with the scent of burning stone. It felt as if the world was ending in that single moment. The human soldier staggered, but did not fall. His sword still glowed, brighter with each heartbeat. The light pushed back the shadows around him, creating a circle of hope in the storm. Warriors drew near, clinging to him as if his presence alone kept them alive. He did not understand why. The blade burned brighter, but he felt its warmth sink into his bones. Something ancient stirred inside him, a fire long hidden, now breaking free. The orc warlord noticed it too. Between swings of his axe, he caught sight of the glow wrapping the soldier like armor. His eyes narrowed, not in anger but in respect. He had fought beside many warriors, but none had ever carried power like this. It was not the strength of muscle, nor the sharpness of steel. It was something beyond, something that did not belong to mortals. Deep in his heart, the warlord knew he was fighting beside destiny itself. The dark figure on the cliff raised its hand, and the storm answered. Its voice rumbled like thunder, reaching every ear. "So the air wakes," it said, cold and sharp. "The blood of the forgotten kings flows again." The words froze the battlefield. Humans gasped, orcs growled in confusion, but all turned their eyes to the soldier. He himself stood still, his heart racing. He had never known of kings, never claimed a throne, yet the words felt like chains tightening around his soul. The Colossus struck again, its massive hand crashing down. The soldier raised his sword, and the blade blazed with light. The strike that should have crushed and shattered instead, the shockwave sending both armies tumbling back. The ground split, fire burst from the cracks, and the Colossus howled in rage. The soldier stared at his own hands, shaking, not from fear but from the impossible. He had stopped the unstoppable. The war had shown him what he truly was, but the power was not his alone. The sword hummed, alive, whispering in a voice only he could hear. Words too old to understand filled his mind, carrying visions of battles long past, kings long dead, and empires that had ruled before memory. He saw men like him, standing against darkness, each carrying the same fire in their veins. The sword was not a weapon, it was a crown. And now it had chosen him. The orc warlord stood beside him, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He looked at the soldier not as an enemy, but as a leader. "If you are king," he said through clenched tusks, "then lead. The clans will follow you, even mine." His words carried no mockery, no pride, only truth. Around them, warriors lifted their weapons again, their fear melting into fury. They had seen hope, and it burned brighter than the storm. The dark figure laughed, the sound like stone breaking. "You cannot bind them," it said. "I broke your line once, and I will break it again." With a sweep of its arm, the Colossus lunged, its massive body tearing through the battlefield. Warriors scattered, some crushed beneath its steps. Others burned by its roar. But the soldier stood firm, his sword raised, its light striking against the dark. For every step the monster took, he pushed back, his fire growing stronger. The clash of light and shadow turned the valley into a furnace. Every strike shook the ground, every roar shattered the sky. The soldier felt the power burning him, threatening to consume him, yet he did not stop. He knew now that his life was no longer his own. He carried more than his sword, more than his people. He carried the weight of an empire that had been lost, and a destiny that refused to die. As the storm raged on, a truth became clear to all who fought. This was no longer a war of clans, no longer a battle for land. This was the return of an ancient struggle, one that would decide not only the valley, but the future of the world. And in the center of it, the human soldier stood, no longer just a warrior, but the heir of fire. Asterisk, the valley was fire and shadow, torn apart by the steps of the Colossus. The storm above howled with unnatural rage, lightning of darkness striking the ground again and again. Warriors on both sides fought with broken blades and bleeding hands, yet still they stood. This was no longer about clans or kingdoms. It was survival against the end itself. The human soldier stood at the center, his sword blazing like a sun. Every strike he made carved through shadow. Every step he took pushed the darkness back. His body shook with the weight of the power inside him, yet he refused to fall. He was no longer fighting for his own life. He was fighting for every voice still screaming in the storm, for every warrior who refused to bow. The sword burned brighter, and with it, so did his spirit. The orc warlord fought beside him, his axe dripping with fire and blood. He laughed in the face of death, each roar louder than the thunder. "If this is the end," he bellowed, "then we make it worthy of song." His warriors answered with a deafening cry, their axes and blades tearing through the tide of shadows. Humans followed too, their shields locked, their spears thrusting forward. Together they became one army, bound not by race but by survival. The dark figure on the cliff spread its arms wide, its cloak whipping like wings. "You cannot stop me," it roared, its voice echoing through the storm. "I ended empires before. I will end yours now." Its hand rose, commanding the Colossus forward. The giant moved, each step a quake, each roar a storm. It reached down with a hand large enough to crush 100 men at once. The world seemed ready to break beneath its grasp, but the soldier lifted his sword high, and for the first time, the storm broke. Light cut through the sky, brighter than fire, sharper than steel. It poured from the blade, flooding across the valley, burning away shadow and smoke. Warriors shielded their eyes, even the orc warlord growled in awe, but none turned away. They had never seen power like this. It was not magic, nor weapon. It was destiny awakening in its purest form. The Colossus howled, striking down with all its force. The soldier met it head-on, his sword clashing with the monster's hand. Light and shadow exploded, shaking the world. For a heartbeat, silence held the battlefield. Then the hand of the giant shattered, its black flesh breaking into ash. The beast staggered, its roar breaking into a cry of pain. The impossible had happened. The Colossus could bleed. The orc warlord did not waste the moment. With a roar, he leapt onto the giant's leg, his axe biting deep into its burning flesh. Other warriors followed, climbing, striking, tearing the monster apart. Humans launched arrows into its wounds. Orcs slammed their spears into its joints. Together they dragged the beast down, each strike a blow not just of steel, but of unity. For the first time, the shadow faltered. The dark figure screamed, its voice no longer thunder but rage. "You are nothing," it cried, a broken line, a forgotten heir, a dying world. Yet even as it spoke, the soldier raised his sword once more. Light wrapped around him like armor, fire blazed in his eyes, and his voice carried across the valley. "Then we are nothing together," he said, "and nothing will break us." His words ignited the last of their strength, and the final charge began. the colossus fell, its body breaking into dust that scattered in the wind. The shadow warriors burned away with it, their glowing eyes fading into silence. The storm cleared, revealing the first light of dawn across the battlefield. The dark figure staggered on the cliff, its form breaking apart, its cloak torn by the wind. For the first time, it looked small, fragile, and afraid. With one last swing, the soldier hurled his sword of light across the sky. It struck the figure, shattering it into nothing but ash carried away by the morning sun. Silence fell across the valley. Warriors stood, breathless, staring at the man who still stood with the glowing sword in his hand. The orc warlord stepped forward, lowering his axe. His voice rumbled deep. "You are no longer just a soldier," he said. "You are the heir, not of men, not of orcs, but of us all." The words echoed across the armies, and slowly, one by one, blades lowered, heads bowed. The war was over, but a new age had begun. An age where the heir of fire, once a nameless soldier, now carried the crown of destiny.